How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another PT Pearl from the Optimal Body Podcast. I'm Dr. Dom.
I'm DocJen.
And today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of talking through a specific pain point, we're going to talk through some of my pain points. Jen's going to kind of throw some questions at me to discuss some of the things that I've either struggled with, some of my specific pain points, and how I kind of have approached them in my own journey. So stay tuned for that.
And this was really spurred on this idea to dive into your own journey and dive into mine, because I remember you were lying down kind of adjusting your neck, and you said for a moment, like, I kind of want to get an image of my neck. Yeah. And we're going to go into why and, you know, the story behind that in a little bit. But it's just, I think, being able to bring this to people, humanize the fact that, yes, we're PTs and we're talking about the body, but we're going through our own journey as well.
And something that we preach all the time is that, like, the image doesn't equal the pain, or the image doesn't equal your symptoms, or you can, regardless of what the image looks like, you can still make improvements. So that's where coming and saying, why would I get to this point where I'm saying, I want to get an image of my neck? And just knowing that it's a really frustrating place that a lot of people get to in their own, like, journeys and stuff. And there are some things that I've been going through in mine that I'm like, hey, the way that I move my neck, or the way that I crank at my neck to try and get relief, is that going to make it worse? And so I think that's a question that always gets in the back of people's minds once they've been having a pain point for a long time, or if it gets worse and they're not sure why. So
yeah, or if they're cracking something over and over, is this bad?
Yeah,
is this, you know?
Right.
Well, I just want to, like, go over your background.
I think that I would relate closest in my movement to a lot of what I call sprint athletes, track athletes, sprinters specifically, and jumpers, basketball, football, baseball. Again, I played at the Division III level, which is, you know, the lower of the NCAA levels of college football, but what I would think was very competitive ball. I was pretty good in high school as far as my team went, and I thought Division III football was very competitive. I'd say one of my biggest prideful moments from college football is that I played in 40 out of 40 games that I was at college. So all 40 games that we had, I played on the field. One of my very first injuries was, I'd say I remember hamstring first, actually. I remember hurting my hamstring when I was in middle school track, kind of what they'd call a hamstring pull, you know, right up low in the butt cheek. And I'm like, okay, why am I having this hamstring issue? It kind of came back a couple times. And I think that's, you know, was my onset of now thinking back, realizing, wow, I was way overusing my hamstrings and not using my glutes, right? And I tended to sit in this way anterior pelvic tilted position, which, you know, as a sprinter, as a sprint athlete, I wanted all that tension in my hamstrings so I could feel nice and powerful. The problem being, when I put all of the power through my hamstrings, I got myself into some issues there. At least that's what I'm thinking about myself going back.
Yeah.
Next issue, kind of funny because it goes right along with this. I started having issues with my hernia, you know, with an inguinal hernia when I was a junior in high school.
Which is
where we have all this fascia and all these tissues that kind of hold in the stuff in our low abdomen. And when we don't handle our pressures too well, kind of between our pelvic floor, our abdominal muscles, I was putting a lot of pressure towards the front of my abdomen. And so I was getting actually a little bit of poofiness out of my inguinal area, which is right around my groin, showing that I had a hernia, which is a protrusion through kind of the fascial tissues in your low abdomen. So my very first hallmark sign that I was having pressure issues in my core, that at that point.
When was that?
That was junior year of high school, the first time I had an actual surgery.
Wow.
So I was 17 when I had my first surgery for hernia. So they put in these meshes, and just the recovery process itself, I had to get used to. Every time I coughed, I had pain in my low abdomen and stuff. And so that just was for about a month kind of working out of that. But then for a few years afterwards, and even into college, I had different pelvic pain. And I've had guys come to me that I played football with on my team that have asked me, you know, why am I leaking, or why am I having, you know, issues with incontinence? Why do I suddenly have urge symptoms and stuff like that? And so I do think there's a lot more people that have these types of symptoms that go silent for a long time. And then we get to this place where we've compensated way too much and have a lot more difficulties taking care of it. So, you know, one, due to a lot of the pressure problems I had, I developed a lot of low back symptoms because I would put a lot of pressure into my low back. And along with that, I think I developed different issues with pelvic floor control and contraction, because again, I think that's where I was missing a lot of my canister support, was in the pelvic floor area. And I think I kind of used and abused my pelvic floor for a while. So the diastasis recti that you brought up, I get a little bit of the poofiness kind of above my abdomen area. So yes, that's something that most pregnant women might see. But again, a lot of men and a lot of older men that I see, I notice have some degree of this as well. So again, not just something that pregnant women will experience. The things that I experience with my symptoms will be more like I'll start exercise and then all of a sudden it's like, man, I need to go right now. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it. And so mine is more what I would call an urge type thing. And I notice when that happens, I tend to go into this position of where my body wants to react and go in this position of guarding where I'll extend through my low back and lock up. And really then I'll do what my body always has done, and I'll not support through my low abdomen and my pelvic floor. When in reality, the thing that generally helps with both that and some of the other things that we're probably going to dive into is if I return to a really good centered breath that kind of draws my ribs down, shows me to just tuck into that pelvic floor a little bit, I can feel those urge symptoms kind of recede. And so that's been a cool thing for me to work through, having stages where I feel like that thing controls me versus now I have the tools to, if I feel something come on, I can do a couple things and take control back from it. Yeah, so both of my knees, I've had issues kind of in what we would say the medial compartment or the inside of the knees with the meniscus, which we had a podcast episode on. They're just the two padding things. They look kind of like half moons that are on the insides of our knees. And I have torn and had surgery on one of them and have similar symptoms on the other one that I've never had an image or surgery on, and had recurring issues kind of come back into the right one. And so again, I think that's one of the things where I kind of always compensated in my core, and it caused me to position a little differently through my knees when I would go into squat and hinge patterns, so that my knees would fall slightly inside where my feet were, and I would put a lot more pressure through that inside compartment of the knee. And so a lot of what I'm doing now is integrating my core stability that I work on so much with higher level hip and knee movements, right? So you take something like a pistol squat, which is a single leg squat, right? And then I raise my heel, which puts a lot more pressure through my knee. And then I'm doing a single leg pistol squat with the heel raised. That's something that puts my right knee on an island and makes it do a lot of work and makes it control a lot. And so, I might integrate something like that into how I train now, or do the task, go to the sand, do some controlled jumping drills in the sand, what we'd call plyometrics. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I'll go over to the sand and I'll do some jumping drills or do some animal flow in the sand, because I know that's going to challenge me a little more to be aware of the knee. So after training in that controlled environment, if I go and have a competition or play a game on the sand, I might be more prepared to succeed and not hurt myself. And when we go back to foundation, like that's before I'm doing all this other stuff, right? I'm working on the foundational mobility that my hips chronically tight, which is why I think is one of the reasons I compensated with so much low back motion and so much pelvic motion. My hips couldn't do it, so my pelvis and my low back would compensate, right? Same with my knees. My knees would do slightly more because my hips would hit their limit, and then my knees would have to compensate a little bit, which is a product of how my squat. I was so wide with my squat that my hips were as wide as they could get, but my knees would still kind of fall just inside my feet. Even though it's like, oh yeah, I'm keeping my hips activated, it was still, bumping up against the limits of the knees. So I do think that hip mobility has been a huge thing for me. 585 pounds in a back squat. I cleaned 385 in a power clean and jerk about 335. So it's like I was putting these inordinate amount of weight on my back or over my head. And if I can think now of the different places that I was compensating, the amount of forces I was putting through my knees and my low back and my shoulders, doesn't surprise me that I've had some issues there. So as soon as I hit PT school, I'm like, wow, I really right now get to start focusing on some of these places I've been compensating. And I really have never returned since to trying to lift a maximum weight. I'm more so just trying to now control my body weight really well through all of the ranges that I might need to. And I just had this instance where I kind of collapsed on a back squat. That was a heavy one, had this really bad pain, mid-thoracic type area more on the left side. And, it lasted 6 to 8 days, kind of went back down. I was like, whatever. It was a little bit irritating, but kind of just got back into playing and lifting again. And that was an instance that I started, remembering this recurring pain, kind of like upper thoracic, low cervical on my left side. And, since then it's just been, okay, move, get my neck to crack a couple times and then it goes away. And, it's once that starts happening for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and it starts coming back, and then it starts moving up the neck into the ears or causing into headaches or going down into the low back on the left side. That's when you're like, okay, what the heck's actually going on here? And then I would say comes one of the second instances as to why I know I have neck pain and carry neck trauma. I got in a really bad car accident and had a really, significant head injury. Number 2, I also played college football and had a lot of hits in the head and rattled the neck around. And something that I've always thought of being a PT is I know there's, and I say this, like I know there's probably something wrong on an image with my spine based on my history, traumatic wise, the car accidents, all of the head hits. I wouldn't be surprised if something showed up, even if I didn't have symptoms, right? I would say that, based on studies and stuff of the prevalence of people with things that'll show up positive on images and whatnot. But I was also having these significant painful symptoms and things that would come up that I would consider are like debilitating. Like I can't do my normal work without having this thing affect my functioning, or affect how I'm functioning and the quality of my function. So that's where I'm like, is me cracking my neck in a really, intense position and pushing on my neck, pushing into something that is damaged. And I know that there are a few things that I can do that changes the way that I feel, right? And that's the most empowering thing as me, just as a person, but also as a provider, when I see patients realize, oh, I actually did this thing and it helped the pain go down and I didn't feel that panic, right? Because I think that's really what we all get to, is this place of panic where it's just like, I can't get this pain to go down. What's gonna happen? My head's gonna explode, or my neck's gonna fall off, or whatever. And as soon as we get into that cycle, it actually will just perpetuate our pain further, because then we're just flooding our system with all these fear messages and stuff. I just generally go right back to the thing that helps me the most, which is usually bending my knees up, getting my low back resting on the ground, placing hands on my low ribs and taking a couple big deep breaths into my hands, tightening kind of my low rib cage down, and kind of trying to just sit tall through my neck. And even just doing that and sitting here, I can feel like a nice stretch down my back in the place that is the stretch or the hurt so good for me. And inevitably, after 5 or 10 of those breaths, my symptoms will recede or go down. And my thing is set the state and then clean the slate. In the morning, I wake up. Let's set the state with some breath work. Let's get ourselves to calm down, prime those positions. And then no matter what crap we go through during the day, we're going to end the day by cleaning the slate, giving ourselves that influence back, calming that system back down, and getting ourselves ready for bed. So 2 of the things I do the most that when I don't do, I notice the difference, is some sort of morning and nighttime breath work. If we go through my rap sheet, like I tore something really bad in my left foot. I have had surgery on my right knee that I, have a similar injury on my left knee, double surgeries for the inguinal hernias, consistent upper back and neck pain, right torn rotator cuff, left separated AC joint. It happens.
Yeah.
Shit happens. I'm sorry, guys. And so we can let those things sit and define us, and we can sit in those places, or we can find the path that best influences our body to be able to continue to advance and optimize the way we move. And I choose that path. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helped you learn a little something about just the body's ability to adapt and overcome the things that can happen in our movement journey. If you like something, comment below, or if you want to know anything else or have any questions, please leave them below, because we're always looking for more things that we can create these PT Pearls about for you.